Welcome to today's AAPS webinar on realigning the AAPS communities. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers, Dr. Dan Bowe, Chair of the AAPS Scientific Advisory Committee, and Dr. Amanda Hayes, Chair of the Board of Directors Communities Subcommittee.
So we're here today to talk about the AAPS communities. Why are the AAPS communities important? They're important for connection, they're important for networking, they're important for providing a place for pharmaceutical scientists to convene and talk about topics and discussion points that matter to them. I think the communities is a big source for AAPS for scientific collaboration. This is where we all get together and talk through the difficulties that we have in our day-to-day jobs and how we come to solve these problems together. So it's a very important place for AAPS members to have this place to have these conversations. And we're here today to talk through the future of the AAPS communities and what this looks like for the future scientists who come into the pharmaceutical sciences field. We want the communities to continue to be a place where we have these collaborations and we have these scientific discussions and this sense of community for all. So we're going to talk through a new structure for these communities. So moving into a new structure, a little bit different than how we've been operating in past years. And I'm going to ask Dan about how this came about and why we decided to do this.
Thank you, Amanda. I am currently the chair of the Scientific Advisory Committee, and a couple of years ago, I think in early 2023, one of the tasks that the SAC had was to charge, I guess, from the board was to look at the science that our communities offer and the scientific structure, and see how well our science is currently reflecting our membership, how well the science and our community structure is providing that content to our diverse membership. And we cover within AAPS a large portion, essentially the entire pharmaceutical life cycle. So the task was to really look at how we're structured to support our scientists, to support you as members, and how is that looking now? Can we do that in a different way, or can we make that somewhat better? So a task force was formed in 2023 to review that structure and make some recommendations to the board of directors on the structure that really could promote and improve scientific exchange and engagement of all of our members across the association, and see how well we could align those communities with the scientific infrastructure that really connects AAPS's events and products as a whole. So that task force was formed, as I said, in 2023, and we looked at a lot of different things. Right now, AAPS had around, when we started this evaluation, around 36 communities. Some of these scientific communities are very active and very engaged, and others maybe were less active and had less activities going on. That didn't mean that the science there isn't particularly important, but some communities are more active scientifically than others. So we spent a lot of time really looking at each of the sort of the growth and decline, looking back to like around 2018 to see what the engagement was like within the different communities. What were the volunteers like? What were the activities that each of those communities were doing? And as I said, some communities are very active, and some we found were really not so active at all. So we also, as part of the SOC's charge, we're looking at creating the scientific structure, the taxonomy around the science of AAPS. So we also spent some time looking at how a community structure, a scientific structure, could fit in with the taxonomy of AAPS. So as I said, we found there was a large number of communities with varying degrees of activity and engagement. Some communities had multiple subgroups, there was some fragmentation in places, and then some inconsistency in the scope and the deliverables, I guess, for each of the communities. So there was definitely a recognition that we needed to do better if we wanted to capture and maintain and expand on the science that we offer to our members within an AAPS. So one of the clear outcomes of all of that extensive work and looking at a huge amount of data that the task force spent a lot of time looking at, we went back to the SAC to make some recommendations. And the real recommendation here was we really needed to think about how could we reduce the number of scientific communities we had, but really making sure that at the same time we retain all of AAPS's science and retain that in a more simplified structure such that we can give members, existing members and new members, clear areas where they could see their science and where they felt like they would fit within the organization. So really creating a new structure that would foster collaboration as well across the different communities and enable us at AAPS to incorporate new science. During the task force's review, one of the sort of the major findings that we had were that there were a large number of communities that really had a varying degree of activity engagement in our science. And there was some non-scientific communities as well. So taking the focus, looking at the science and the communities, we also saw that there were many communities that had multiple subgroups, which then creates some duplication and fragmentation in the scientific conversation. And many of these groups are working in very similar areas, covering the same science, but fragmented. So with this new structure, what we really hope to achieve is retaining all of the same science, but encouraging more of that collaboration in a more productive and effective manner, hopefully, to decrease the sort of fragmentation, segmentation of the science at AAPS. Some of the other things that we found were, inconsistencies in the scope of the different communities. Some were very broad, some were more narrow. And so I think with this new structure and really retaining all of the same science, we're positioning AAPS in a much stronger place as we look at supporting our existing and future members and supporting the science now and the science heading into the future. As we know, the scientific landscape within pharma is rapidly evolving and changing on a daily basis almost.
Dan, I think you brought up a really good point with the inconsistency in scopes. We have some communities that are very narrowly focused at the moment and some very broad in the conversations that they have. But I think moving into this new structure, it really should, and just reiterating what you said, should be a place for everybody. So the narrow scope conversations, those discussions, there's still a place in that community and the new structure for those conversations to happen. And it's also going to open up the conversation to other folks who maybe need to hear that. And it falls within their science, but maybe they're not extremely close to this topic or another, but it really does give the visibility of those members to join the conversation and listen. And I think it's going to be um, a very positive thing moving forward because it really capitalizes on AAPS being the convener of pharmaceutical sciences. So it's going to bring everybody to the table and everybody into the conversation. And I think that's super important what you said about the alignment of the science and retaining all the science and the new structure.
Yeah, I think that, that was the biggest thing that our task force spent a lot of time on was, making sure that we don't lose through this reorganization or rethinking or reimagining of communities, that we don't lose the science and we create opportunity to bring new science into AAPS. We have also created a new what we're calling emerging scientific communities where our members can make proposals for new scientific communities that, in an emerging science area that we feel is not fully mature yet to fit into one of our existing scientific communities, but allows us the opportunity to create a home for that science as that science is continuing to sort of develop and maybe once that science is more fully developed, it can fit or may fit better with our new scientific core communities, but allows our members the opportunity and allows the organization the opportunity to expand and look at those exciting new areas in a more structured way than we've done in the past.
Yeah, I love that. I love the flexibility and the agility to make sure we're staying on top of things. Things change so fast. It's insane how the regulatory evolution that we've seen, the sciences themselves change so quickly, and what we do and what we focus on. And it's important that we have that agility and that flexibility to keep those conversations going and to be in those conversations to begin with.
So as a result of the task force findings, the new scientific community structure was simplified from around those, 34 or 36 current scientific communities to creating what we think now is a simplified structure, retaining all of our core science within AAPS, and really boiled down to creating 8 core scientific communities with the ability to also create potentially 2 to 3 emerging scientific communities at any one time. These core scientific communities maintain and retain all of the science that we had within our larger community structure, but should promote more of the connections, collaborations across communities, and still retain that science. Our goal and recommendations to the board were that there should be no more than 10 core scientific communities really at any one time. And what's exciting now with the new structure and the new process is that the SAC will also review those scientific community structure and the structure of the scientific communities every few years to really ensure that it's the structure and the science within the structure is still meeting AAPS members' scientific needs and is staying current with mainstream pharmaceutical sciences. And we all know how rapidly the science in the pharma space is evolving. We're also creating recommendations within the SAC on how to add a potential core scientific community, maybe retire a community if it doesn't make sense anymore within AAPS, and then also provide an opportunity for our members to propose emerging scientific communities, communities that might focus on novel, cutting edge fields of research that are really at the forefront of technological or scientific advancements within pharma discovery and development, but really are not broadly implemented in such a way that they would form or be part of our existing core scientific communities. The idea with this emerging science is to really bring in that exciting science to AAPS, ideally no more than 2 to 3 emerging scientific communities at any one time. And these ideally will be short-lived. I think we talked within the SAC of around, 3 to 6 years seemed about the right length of time for these emerging scientific communities, allowing them the time to really, the science to grow and mature, and then perhaps disband and be incorporated into the existing core communities. So really exciting changes with this new simplified structure, retaining all of our current science within AAPS, but also providing us the opportunity to expand into different areas, into new exciting scientific, technological areas within pharma discovery and development over the coming years. So Amanda, once the SAC had made their recommendations on this new exciting scientific structure for our communities within AAPS, uh, your board subcommittee took over this process, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about what your team did to bring us to where we are today with the rollout of the new scientific communities.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. So the board community subcommittee was formed to be a support of the communities. So in shepherding into this new structure, taking us from where we're at into that vision of what this new structure would look like, and really just putting in place the transition plan and the process of how we would get there. So before we could start, working through the transition and the process of getting us there, we had to have a good idea of what the new communities would look like and how it would be a place to uh, be able to move the AAPS communities forward. So the first thing we did is we started talking through the governing structure of the communities. So we put together a simple leadership structure. It's going to consist very similarly to how most communities are led. There's going to be a chair and a vice chair, then a secretary and a pasture eventually. And these folks are going to work together as the leaders of these new communities. And these, keep in mind, these core scientific communities are quite broad in the scientific topics that they encompass. So these are slated to be very fairly large communities, and these leaders are going to be in charge of really keeping all the science that's related to that community within that structure. So there's going to be a lot of topics to discuss there. But essentially, the other thing we had to think about was kind of how to put together a supportive structure for the new communities that would allow engagement, that would be inclusive, that would be basically a good place to have those focused topic discussions, to be able to uh, pull in all the science that encompasses that new community. So what we talk through is having alongside those leaders is the community together working through the topics of interest that they wanted to discuss. And this has been put into play with focus areas. So the community together collectively are going to work to put together focus areas or focus topics that they want to tackle. And the idea is that these focus topics should hopefully provide also another mechanism for flexibility and agility and to keep the science moving. So as a focus area, maybe some discussion happens here. Maybe it's the output is a programming session at one of the conferences. Maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a publication that they're working on together. And then once that's achieved, maybe they can fold in a different topic of discussion. But at any given time, there's going to be many topics of discussion. There's going to be many focus areas that they're going to tackle together as a group, as a community. And it really is just to make sure that science stays fresh, that we're, keeping a good pulse on what's happening in the industry and making sure we're having the right conversations as a community. So that's kind of where we started is that structure, and really just providing a supportive structure for the new communities as they start to transition into that. The other thing we talk through is having some examples and good ideas for these communities on things that they can work on. So what we're hoping is the board community subcommittee is going to be very supportive for these new communities to make sure that they always have the support that they need from AAPS to do the things that they want to do, to have the conversations that they need to have, and to engage all AAPS members to the extent that they need to. So just providing that layer of support. And yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at. And the last thing we talk through is the transition plan, and that's kind of where we're at. We're speaking to a lot of the current community leadership and members, and our hope is to keep it within this transition plan is not to have any gap in the scientific discussions that are occurring. We're moving forward. We're going to be able to provide a process that will carry these conversations into the new structure and make sure that there's a place for everyone. So your science isn't going anywhere. You have a place in the new structure of communities at AAPS. It just might look a little bit different, and you'll have hopefully conversations with a lot more people in the new structure.